Hi, I'm John F. Allen.
And I'm R.J. Sullivan.
And we're the Two Towers.
Greetings and welcome to the Two Towers Talk Show. I'm your host, Tower One, John F. Allen.
And I'm Tower 2, R.J. Sullivan.
Today, we're going to be discussing and reviewing Loki, the MCU American television series created by Michael Waldron for the streaming service Disney Plus, based on the Marvel Comics characters and featuring the title character of the same name. It is the third television series in the MCU produced by Marvel Studios to stream on the Disney Plus service, and it shares continuity with the films within the MCU franchise. The series takes place after the events of the film Avengers Endgame, in which an alternate version of Loki created a new timeline. Waldron serves as head writer, with Kate Herron directing for the first season. And if you didn't know, this has already been greenlit for a second season. Just FYI to our audience. Tom Hiddleston reprises his role as Loki from the film, and Gugu Mbatha Raw is one of the actresses in this series. We also have Wunmi Mosaku, Eugene Cordero, Tara Strong, who I will love to talk about a little bit later. Owen Wilson does a fantastic job, and several others. But I will mention these two: Richard E. Grant. We'll be talking about who he plays and how he played that role, and Jonathan Majors, who has a big role in this that sets up a lot, and he's a very talented up-and-coming young actor, so definitely we'll be talking more about him and the character he portrays in this series. This series was confirmed in November 2018, and filming began in January 2020 and was halted in March of 2020 due to COVID. That delayed everything within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So no big
real
surprise
universe
there.
too.
Right, exactly. It halted everything and is threatening to halt stuff again. Let's hope not. But the series premiered on June 9th, 2021. Its first season consisted of 6 episodes and concluded on July 14th, and is part of the Phase 4 of the MCU. It received positive reviews with praise for the performances, musical score, and visuals. So, let me just say that I really, really, really enjoyed this particular series. It's always a treat to see Tom Hiddleston as Loki. He embodies that character so well that I couldn't imagine anyone else playing him. He gives it so much charisma and flair, and he's so good at it that if I met him in real life, I would have a hard time believing anything he told me. That would that's a testimony to him as an actor. I love Tom Hiddleston. He is awesome in this, and I love the character Loki. I followed the Marvel Comics for the better part of 40 years, almost 50 at this point. It's very interesting when you see these iconic characters brought to life on the silver screen and on the small screen. You see the interconnectedness that the MCU has across the feature films and the streaming service series, and they don't miss a beat. It's like watching a serial movie, like back in the 40s when you go to the theater and you every week and you'd see the new serial, the new episode, because back then not everyone had televisions. So, that's how people saw their TV shows, quote unquote. They weren't TV shows back then, literally, but that was the closest thing they had. And so we're seeing a resurgence of this, in the MCU and how these Disney Plus shows within the MCU are being put together and how they are being broadcast. And I think that it's refreshing to see. Is certainly for me is I'm enjoying it a lot. So much so that I'm like at the end of the episodes, I'm like, dang, I've got to wait another week, and but I'm glad that they're doing it that way as opposed to just dropping all of the episodes at once because this gives me something to look forward to, and I think it keeps the show on people's lips for the duration of the series. What about you, RJ?
All right. Well, I'll lead with, I don't think I liked it as much as you did, but I will follow that up with I liked it a lot, and I liked it a great deal, especially while I was watching with it. So I'm going to start with the positives and then get into kind of, I guess I'd call them concerns about what this show maybe reflects about the future direction of the series, and what I thought was an inherent weakness of Loki that I'm hoping will not continue into further productions, but I think it'll be clear as we go. So let's start with Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson. Not two people I would have thought would be in a streaming series, just point blank. I think of both of them as movie stars, and they command a certain amount of, financial reward for their work, and they work at a certain level. And I was pleasantly surprised to hear, first of all, they were going to do a Loki series, and second of all, that Tom Hiddleston was on board. That completely surprised me. I did not think that he would be open to a Disney Plus streaming show, because generally speaking, that's kind of a step down from the movie level. And kudos to him for being available for that, and also given the performance that he gave. Now Owen Wilson, he basically always plays Owen Wilson, but he has a presence, and that's not to be discarded. He brought his A game to this, and in all of the scenes that he's in, he brings that Owen Wilson charisma and that Owen Wilson character, and it works very, very well for the story that they're telling. And nobody seems to be phoning it in or just there for the paycheck. It all feels like everyone's very committed. While I'm talking about outstanding performances, I need to mention Jonathan Majors. I won't get into who he plays yet. I think you kind of want to introduce that when we get there. But I was surprised researching how small of a resume he has. Apparently, this is one of his I guess his major premiere in a major way. He doesn't have many credits before this one, and he certainly was one of the outstanding characters here. So I'll lead with that. I'm also going to mention the production. We have really reached a point, John, where people in a television drama go into what looks like other worlds, and they look like they're in other worlds. I mean, everything, you have the depth and the imagery and the completely alien looking landscapes that aren't built out of material and brick, and they don't have to build, they can build entire worlds on the computer now and have people interact in them, and it looks seamless. There was some really amazing interactions within the environments here that looked completely real, and I know some of that started with The Mandalorian and continued into WandaVision, and you can just see that they're perfecting so many technologies for the small screen that are only going to look better and bigger and better when we get to see them on the big screen later. But there were many times through this where they are walking along, interacting with spaceships and monsters and environments that aren't actually there, and yet it looks absolutely real and absolutely first rate, which for a streaming show, even though it is Disney, it's just neat to see the attention paid to that kind of production value. And also the world itself, the time cop stuff, and the corporation and the building and everything had almost like a throwback sci-fi feel to it, and there was a lot of attention paid to that and a lot of detail. I loved all of that. So I suppose the best way to summarize what it felt off for me through the entire thing was a couple years ago when they announced this, and they said, we're going to make a Loki miniseries and it's going to have Tom Hiddleston in it. When I think about what that means Loki is going to be trying to conquer something, or he's going to be scheming something. He's going to generally be that bad guy that we love to hate, and he's going to be kind of the instigator of his story. And whether it would be like trying to take back, whether to try to overthrow Odin or try to take over Earth or something. There are certain assumptions with the idea of a Loki miniseries. This confounds that. This goes in a completely different direction, where Loki is kind of yanked out of his life. Well, I mean, we're going to get into that as we go, but he's kind of pulled out and put into a completely different environment. And I felt like Marvel really, really wanted people to understand this new world. So they thought, we'll bring Loki into it, and the viewers will learn about the world by watching Loki interact with it, which is good, which is fair. But I felt a lot of the time it wasn't Loki's story. I think when we get to episodes 5 and 6, that changes. But before then, I mean, I almost felt like this could have been Black Widow, this could have been Spider-Man, this could have been Ant-Man. Anybody could have been pulled out into the new world, and it would have unraveled pretty much the same way. And it didn't feel like Loki was particularly relevant for a lot of it until we get to the end. There are things that are very Loki specific, but when I think about what a Loki show should be, this was not that. There was a lot of the old Wizard of Oz line, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I kind of felt like this was one of the few projects where I could see the man behind the curtain. I could kind of see what they were trying to do a little more than I'm used to. Like WandaVision could not be WandaVision if it weren't for Scarlet Witch and the Vision. I mean, they were the instigator of that situation, even though it was a psychic break, and they were the cause of it, and they also had to try to resolve it. Falcon and the Winter Soldier was very much their story in the style of their story, and this one was not what I would expect a Loki story to be, which is not to say it was bad, but when this is one of the few times, because I am on record several times giving Disney and Marvel credit. When they tell a Spider-Man story, it's a Spider-Man story. When they tell an Ant-Man story, it's an Ant-Man story. Iron Man, Thor, everyone's allowed to be who they are and interact in their world without the plot changing that too much. And this was the one time where I felt like Loki was kind of superfluous to a lot of his own story. And because we know they're doing What If in the future, and it's pretty clear how this sets that up. And we know they're doing other things for Phase 4, and it's pretty clear a lot of this is to set up future world building. And I found that a little off-putting, and I didn't think it worked quite as smoothly as a lot of the other things out there. And for that reason, I don't rank it as high as the other two. I thought Falcon and the Winter Soldier was absolutely their story. Same with WandaVision. This one is Loki with an asterisk. Because they introduce a lot of new elements here that aren't tied to Loki normally. And so I liked it a lot. I kind of wonder what that Loki series might have looked like that I was kind of hoping to see when I started, but that's not what we got, and that's mostly okay. So that's where I am with that.
Well, all right. I will piggyback on some of the things that you said. So, yeah, I have a very different take on this than RJ. So let me first say that it was no surprise to me that Tom Hiddleston was open to reprising his role as Loki on this series. Not in the least, because I have seen plenty of interviews where he has talked about how much fun and how much he adores playing Loki, that with that, it was not a surprise at all. Plus, you have Disney, which has deep pockets, so it wasn't even, I don't even think money was that big of a thing when it came down to it for these actors, including Owen Wilson. But more to Tom Hiddleston, I see where you were coming from, but I think that was something from long ago. That the mindset that doing television series is a step down from films, in the sense that when you have productions that have values like this, where it's so movie light, it's like there's no missing a beat here. You're not getting less in the way of special effects or budget than you are from a film. I don't think that holds up anymore. Not when you're talking about these types of series. And as we move forward with streaming services, any of the other ones either, that gap is very narrow now. And I think at some point it will be closed to an extent to where, it's not going to be a step up or down for movies or television when it comes to streaming services, because the quality of what is being offered is so high in production value and storytelling in and of itself, with directors and producers coming in on these streaming shows, that it's not the same. I mean, I agree that one time it was, but in my opinion, it's not that way anymore. We are definitely seeing changes, and we've seen changes, and I don't think that they're going anywhere. I think if anything, the production value for television is going to get to a level that's very extremely close to what we see in the theater. Certainly, Disney Plus has proven that, hands down, over any of the other streaming services, I think, because of the characters and the stylizations for the MCU and the Star Wars universe, for that matter. So that's where I have a differing thought on that. And as far as Jonathan Majors, I agree. Although I will mention that he was in Lovecraft Country, which, although was canceled, was very big in his credits leading up to his being cast in this series and for future MCU installments, including other streaming shows and feature films. And I think that his talent was showcased very well in Lovecraft Country, and I'm pretty certain that that's what led the Marvel Studios and Disney Plus to tap him for this role in this series.
Yeah, they definitely struck while the iron was hot on that, because Lovecraft Country was just last year, so
right.
They grabbed him right up.
Right, yeah, and it was definitely powerful enough of a performance that he, was definitely noticed, and he has the charisma to pull off these roles. And I think that Disney and Marvel Studios are nothing if not very sharp when it comes to recruiting talent and recruiting the right talent for roles within the MCU. People may be thinking, oh, this person would be better, or they have someone else in mind. But when we see the product, the finished product that Marvel Studios produces, we fall in line because they know what they're doing, and they do it very well. So I would definitely want to say that. As far as what you were talking about, as far as the series and his Loki, the character involvement in the series, I agree in the sense that it did not become such an integrated Loki did not become such an integrated part of what was going on inextricably until later on in the season. For me, it was about midway through. And most certainly in the end, but it was midway through where it was solidified. However, in the beginning, I didn't have any pause with this because I know that this is a variant of the Loki that we've seen in the other shows and the other television, in the other films, the feature films. So this is like having a version of the character with not the same life experiences as we've seen the other Loki that we know and love experience. So of course it's going to be different, and of course it's going to feel different, and that was expected from me because I knew that if this Loki was taken from the events of the first Avengers film, that's very, very beginning of the MCU. It's like the third or fourth film in the MCU film franchise, and so that's very early, considering how many films have been produced since then. So all of the things we've seen our Loki go through, and the changes to his character and the development of his character aren't going to be imparted onto this variant of Loki. So we are seeing the same character, but at a different point than what we've seen before. And that didn't unnerve me at all. As a matter of fact, I quite expected it to be that way and had no problem with it whatsoever. I think that it was well done. I don't think that they missed any beats about it. It was documented very carefully, as Marvel Studios tends to do. When we saw the Avengers Endgame, and we saw that the variant was created at that point, creating a new timeline, we knew that there was a loose end. And now they're paying off that loose end. And I think they paid it off very well. I'm not saying that I enjoyed this particular series more than Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I would say that it's very close to WandaVision, but not quite as good for me. So it's still number 3, but I dug it and I understood it, and it didn't give me the same types of feelings that it gave you in me watching it. Let me put it that way.
It just, for me, parts of it felt a little transparent, and I'm not used to that from Marvel. Um, when we've shifted away from our normal story because we really, really want you to know about this other entity, and we need to tell you about this entity that you were unaware of up until now. So we're going to spend a long time here because this is going to be important later. It was a little on the nose for me. And again, that's not to say I didn't enjoy what I was watching when I watched it, but I'm not used to seeing the gears behind, I kind of felt like I was looking at a thought process in real time, and I'm not used to that from Marvel. It didn't ruin the experience. It was just different from what I'm used to. So maybe that clarifies things.
Yeah, I mean, and I can definitely respect that. It is, and I can agree that it is different. But I saw it coming in a lot of ways. When I first watched Avengers Endgame and I saw the variant disappear with the Tesseract, I knew that when they started talking about different timelines, when the Hulk was having the conversation with the Ancient One, and they were talking about how that was getting played out, and then when they introduced the time travel concepts within Endgame, none of this surprised me. None of this, the way that it was handled, any of it surprised. None of it surprised me at all, and I think that's to the point of what you're saying, that it wasn't a surprise. It was pretty much on the nose, but at the same time, there was quite a bit of setup for this particular series that they went about, and it played out most specifically in Avengers Endgame. It was something that they left those little breadcrumbs out for that film that I think perfectly set up where this series went. And this series went in a direction that perfectly sets up where the rest of Phase 4 is going, and leading into the big concepts for Phase 5 and beyond. So I liked the way they handled it. I think that they handled it well. And I think that, if they'd handled it any other way, that would have felt off to me. So
okay, fair enough.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I guess that's just the perspectives that we have on it.
Sure. So do we want to give our ratings and then break it down episode by episode, get into spoilers?
Absolutely. I will let you go ahead and give your rating first.
All right. For all the reasons stated, I thought it was great. I thought it was good, not great. I really enjoyed what I was watching. I had a lot of positives for it, but I found it a little off. I'm coming in at 3.5 towers out of 5.
All right. I enjoyed it. I really dug the way that they did things, despite my minimal quibbles about it, which don't seem like there were any. But as we get into the spoiler section of this, they will become more apparent. So I give this 4 towers out of 5. I think that this sets up a lot of different things moving forward into the MCU, and is going to create a lot of new and exciting franchises to be spawned from it. So that, plus it's Tom Hiddleston as Loki, and I know that this is a variant, not the Loki we came to know and love throughout the rest of the MCU films. This is Tom Hiddleston as Loki, and for me, that can't go wrong at all. So, I'm giving this 4 towers out of 5. I think that the production value and Tom Hiddleston and the other performances by Owen Wilson, Sophia Di Martino as Sophie, and Gugu and Baba Raw, Umi, Mosaku, just to name a few. And, you know, Jonathan Majors, of course, gives it, gives it the, I guess, the value for me to rank it that high.
Alrighty.
All right.
So let's get to the breakdown.
All right. So here's your warning. This is a spoiler territory. We are going to talk about this show. There's not going to be any punches pulled. We are going to be diving right into the events within the 6-episode arc. So if you have not seen Loki, you may want to stop here, go watch all 6 episodes, and then come back, because we will be talking about all the things that will be considered spoilers. You have been warned, and we're going to get into it. So, let me start with one thing before we dive into episode 1. When it comes to the casting for this show, it was spot on for me. And everyone plays their role very well. And the musical score, to me, is awesome. As a matter of fact, just as a FYI to those who may be interested in checking it out, if they haven't, the theme song or the theme track for Loki is on my workout playlist, because it has that kind of gravitas for me that really hit home. So, and that's true with mostly all of the MCU films. They put a lot of effort and talent into the musical scores, and this series is no disappointment in that area. So kudos to them, kudos to the director, Kate Herron, and they did a great job with this from those behind the scene standpoints. All right. So episode 1 is titled Glorious Purpose, directed by Kate Herron and written by Michael Waldron. Loki is arrested by the Time Variance Authority, the TVA, when he creates a new timeline after escaping from the Battle of New York with the Tesseract back in 2012. The TVA resets the timeline, and this variant Loki is standing trial in front of Judge Ravonna Renslayer for crimes against the sacred timeline. Loki, of course, blames the situation on the Avengers, who had traveled back in time to 2012, but Renslayer says their actions were meant to happen, unlike Loki's escape. Agent Mobius M. Mobius, aka Owen Wilson, takes Loki to the Time Theater to review his past misdeeds and question his history of hurting people. He reveals that Loki, in his intended future, inadvertently causes the death of his adoptive mother, Frigga. Upon seeing this, Loki attempts to escape, but gives up after realizing that the TVA's power exceeds that of the Infinity Stones. Loki returns to the Time Theater and watches more future events, including his own death at the hands of Thanos. He then agrees to help Mobius hunt down another Loki variant who has killed several TVA agents and stolen their timeline resetting charges. Now, I will get a little bit more, we will get a little bit more into the character of Kang later. But in the comics, Ravonna Renslayer, who is portrayed by Gugu and Baba Raw, is the girlfriend or wife, I'm not sure, of Kang in the comics. And I thought it was interesting in how they introduced her character. And my knowledge of the comics was like, oh Lord, she's tied to Kang. I wonder how this is going to play out. This particular episode I thought was a great introduction to the Time Variance Authority. The look of the set and everything had the old Doctor Who look to it, and it seemed like retro, but also futuristic, or at least as far as the technology is concerned. And I thought that that was a cool little feature of this show set design. I think that seeing Loki again from this standpoint, where he's just been removed from the Battle of New York in 2012, is a great setup for the series, but also a great look back at the Loki that we knew prior to the subsequent events of Avengers, the first Avengers film. And watching him realize all of the things that he did and his own demise, I guess to me it kind of made me think, wow, that's like seeing stuff that you didn't want to see. But I think that Mobius did that on purpose, of course, because he wanted Loki to be in the right frame of mind to help him hunt down this other Loki variant. And those two incidents, the death of Frigga and his own death at the hands of Thanos, was, I think, a key for how this character develops as we move throughout the series. It's titled Glorious Purpose, which, if you didn't know, that is a phrase that Loki used in the first Avengers film when he was addressing the people right before Cap and Iron Man showed up. So what did you think about this first episode, RJ?
All right. So, yeah, just to go back to my earlier comments, I was surprised. I tend to avoid detailed trailers or detailed synopses of things when I know I'm going to watch them. I try to find that fine line between knowing just enough without knowing too much. So I really didn't know coming into episode 1 exactly where we were going. So when we went to this futuristic sci-fi setting that felt so future and yet so retro, some specific classic 50s sci-fi novels came to mind. I will call out one of my favorites. It's Isaac Asimov is one of my writing heroes. He did a standalone novel called The End of Eternity, which is essentially it could have been the TVA, is what he's writing about. It's about a group of time excuse me, sorry, kind of time police that try to stop variations in time before they overcome what they consider the ideal timeline. So this isn't brand new from Marvel, but it is, it's kind of new for media television. My wife Linda has a favorite. Hold on a second. Okay, had a major frog in my throat for some reason. So let me try this again. My wife Linda's one of her favorite authors, Simon Hawke, from her college days of reading sci-fi, had a series called Time Wars, and there were 10 or 12 or maybe more of those with a very similar setup. So this isn't brand new to science fiction, but it's neat to see it picked up by Marvel, and the fact that they had played around with it in the comics before they then took and chose to adapt it into a TV series was really cool. I definitely have to give a lot of shout out again to Owen Wilson for being in this, and his chemistry with Tom Hiddleston was great. There's a lot of great comical moments. I don't remember if it was episode 1, but I believe it was pretty early on, where they literally hand him the script of his life, and as he's talking, another page pops out that they throw onto the top of the pile. I thought that was really funny. There are lots of neat little moments like that. And then there was the animated clock thing. What was that thing called, John?
Miss
Miss Minutes. Yeah. That was a really neat thing because it was futuristic, but also looked very throwback. It felt almost like a 1920s anime, like a Betty Boop animation, from way back when. I noticed there was a lot of playing around with gears and, pre-digital time faces and things like that. They were definitely going for kind of that throwback old school feel, as well as the idea that this is the future, but they were doing a lot to kind of throw you off as they went. They also made the stakes very real early on. They made it clear that they had no hesitation about killing Loki, killing this variant if he didn't cooperate and help them with the mission. And you definitely felt the stakes early on. So I had, I was somewhat divided between what I was getting and my expectations. It was a little confounding in spots, but I was definitely enjoying what I was watching because I love old sci-fi and I have no problem with that. So I was even though it wasn't what I was expected, I was certainly willing to go along for the ride. And I'll also echo what you said about the music is a lot of fun. I haven't really listened to it a second time since I watched it, but I do remember enjoying it a great deal while the episodes were playing in front of me. So that was my first impression.
All right. Well, just to give Miss Minutes her due, Miss Minutes is voiced by none other than Tara Strong, who is a brilliant voice actress. And you may know her as Batgirl, Barbara Gordon from Batman the Animated Series. She's also the singer of Meg from Family Guy. She is the voice of Ben 10. And she's done a lot of other voice work in other productions. I thought that it's worth noting she was also the voice for Raven in the Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go cartoon series. She's Timmy Turner's voice in Fairly Odd Parents.
I didn't know
and
that.
She was Bubbles of the Powerpuff Girls.
So she's been around.
Yes. She's in our age bracket, despite the fact that she doesn't look it at all. And she definitely doesn't sound like it at all when she's doing her voices. So kudos to Tara Strong. That's why I wanted to give that special shout out to her. And did you notice the Southern drawl on Miss Minutes? She had, it was funny to me because it was kind of like an old lady, like an old auntie from the South that was trying to get you to relax and trying to, lure you in. And that didn't escape me when I was first introduced to her in this series. And the fact that from a visual standpoint, she was anthropomorphic clock. Sure. And of course, the time variance, time clock, it all made sense. But it was interesting to me that how Miss Minutes was portrayed and how she later becomes a harbinger for something or someone else, as we will discuss. as we go forward in the episodes. So, episode 2, The Variant, was directed by Kate Herron. So just so you know, all of the episodes were directed by Kate Herron. So I don't have to keep saying her name over again. But this episode was written by Alyssa Carson. And this episode has Loki joining the TVA's mission to the site of an attack by the variant in 1985 in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Loki stalls and attempts to bargain his way into meeting the timekeepers, who the TVA claims created them and the sacred timeline. Renslayer objects to Loki's further involvement, but Mobius convinces her to give him another chance. Loki researches TVA files and theorizes that the variant is hiding near apocalyptic events where their actions do not affect the timeline. Loki and Mobius confirm this possibility by visiting Pompeii in 79 AD before deducing that the variant is hiding during a hurricane in 2050 Alabama. They are ambushed by the variant, who enchants several locals and TVA agent Hunter B-15. The variant reveals herself to be a female version of Loki and rejects his offer to overthrow the timekeepers together. She sends the stolen reset charges to various points along the sacred timeline, which activate and create numerous branch timelines that throw the TVA into disarray. She teleports away, and Loki follows her. So, we have a mention of Hunter B-15, and Hunter B-15 is portrayed by Wunmi Mosaku, and she is like the badass of all of the hunters. And, she's like, I'm kicking ass and taking no names. And Loki, he sees this the first time he has an encounter with her because he's not expecting to be handled. And, this is, he may not be Thor as far as the power is concerned or whatnot, but he is definitely stronger than any human. And, when he's handled by someone who is a human, it's, albeit she has advanced technology, he's humble. And I thought that was interesting in bringing that particular TVA agent up and giving you our audience a little background on her. And I thought she was cool. But let's go. I have to say about this particular episode, one of the coolest things was the female version of Loki. So the female version of Loki was mysterious, but at the same time, in my opinion, she was her own character. She was not just Loki in drag. She was a separate character who was a version of Loki who had, of course, went through other circumstances, but she was her own character from the very beginning. I mean, of course, there were similarities in both of them being devious and things of that nature, which rings true with Loki throughout, the timelines. But I think that when it's all said and done, Sophie DiMartino did an excellent job as Sylvie, which is the Loki variant's name, or which he prefers to be addressed as. And she also, then this is from the comics, she also is channeling a lot of the Enchantress, who was a character from the comics who sought Thor's affections ad nauseum, and it was like a like a crazy cat type situation where the Enchantress was crazy cat and Thor was Ignatz. He was not having any of it. His eyes his eyes were either on Sif or Jane Foster, depending upon which day of the week it was, but he was not having any of the Enchantress. And I thought that she did an amazing job of channeling that character into this Loki variant, but not tying it to Thor. I'm hoping to see a lot more of her character, not only in season 2 of Loki, but also throughout the rest of the MCU, and hopefully coming up into some Thor films as we prepare for Love and Thunder, and hopefully some other stuff, because Chris Hemsworth has put it out there that he's willing to play Thor for as long as they want him. So that'll be interesting. What did you think about this episode, RJ?
Yeah, so as a science fiction reader, there were a lot of neat ideas in this one that I really took to. I love the idea of the villain plotting from the apocalyptic events, popping in, and that way their actions don't affect the timeline. That tracks true with other ideas presented in things like Doctor Who and various novels that deal with time travel and that sort of thing. I think that does make sense. It does track. My daughter is in college and studying she's studying geology. And so when they went to Pompeii in 79 AD, she had some things to say about the volcanic eruption and the various inaccuracies there. But hey, that's what happens. But we enjoyed that. We enjoyed that for what it was. We had a lot of fun with it. I'm going to throw a name and a title at you, John, because I have actually experienced the female variant idea before in one of my favorite novels that goes back to the 70s. I know you've heard me mention David Gerrold, who is probably most popular for having scripted the Trouble with Tribbles Star Trek episode way back in 1967.
Yes.
He has several novels, including a time travel novel called The Man Who Folded Himself, which deals with all kinds of interesting paradoxes and time travel ideas and things like that. And I doubt that he came up with the idea, but that's the only narrative I've ever read where it goes into someone going back and finding a dimensional variation who was a female version of themselves, and then following through with various ideas of that. And that's really the only other time I can remember specifically seeing that used as a plot point. And now I'm not saying that Stan Lee pulled from that at any time or anything like that, because I doubt that David Gerrold was the first one to do that. But it's not an idea that was entirely new to me, but I was really surprised to see that particular idea brought into it's always neat to see anything with pop culture significance pulling out the deep cut sci-fi ideas. And I think that's one of the things I really enjoyed about this, is that these are things that you don't always see portrayed in shows meant for a mass audience. And so I really appreciated how they were mining some of these more interesting time travel paradox ideas and things like that, and handling it all pretty well and fairly consistent, because they had to juggle a lot here. They had to juggle a lot, and keeping track of all your pieces and making sure that it all makes sense was probably not at all easy for the writers as they were going through these 6 parts. And I can only imagine having the production interrupted by COVID and then having to go back and cut and paste this all back together when you had a long gap in your production, what that was about. But they definitely could see that a lot of work was put into this. Besides the visual, there were some neat ideas I really appreciate they tapped into. And this was the first where I could see what they were trying to do and go, okay, so this is what we're doing. I didn't expect a lot of this, and it was some neat surprises for me.
Most definitely. So, kind of along the lines since we're talking, you mentioned Star Trek, like the mirror universe came to mind
Yes. Hmm.
with that, and that of course isn't new. I can't remember. There was another novel from the 1800s, I believe, that had an alternate, like a mirror type world. Uh, I can't think of it right now, but it's been built upon throughout the centuries, the decades, definitely. And of course, given the source material that Marvel Studios has to mine from when it comes to these characters and the whole TVA and things of that nature with the timeline, it tracks, and I think they did a really good job of that, and it's going to introduce so many other facets of the MCU as we get into more space, cosmic based franchises as we expand into Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and again, Thor, Love and Thunder, and then we're introduced to other characters who are coming, such as Adam Warlock, Nova, a lot of the other cosmic characters. And when you get into the Fantastic Four film, when it is released and those characters are introduced, you're unlocking so many vast amounts of characters that, you know, are going to be cosmic in nature. It's almost, well, it's not almost, it actually is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is breaking off into Earth stories and space stories, which I think is kind of cool. When you think about it, and then you have all this stuff going on in space, you have all this stuff going on Earth, and then in the big event film, you have it all coming together. And I think that that's a formula that Marvel Studios has used much to their advantage and has been very successful with. So I look forward to seeing where all of this is going to lead in the future.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.